Thanks for joining us Behind the Frontline, a podcast providing timeless solutions to everyday workforce and workplace challenges. Frontline Training Solutions is an express employment professionals company, strategically placed between the workplace and the workforce with professionals standing by, ready to combat your unique challenges. Learn more about what we do at frontlineon.com. Well, hello and welcome again to another episode of Behind the Frontline. And I'm sitting in the studio today with Ryan Williams, our Leadership and Team Development Manager. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Nick.
So we are going to talk about a webinar that we recently did on motivation. And Ryan did this webinar and it was well attended and a lot of people asked really great questions, which we're going to cover some of those today in this podcast. But Ryan, I was hoping you could just kind of recap the webinar and talk about like some of the high points and what you talked about. And then also like, what was your hope in what businesses could walk away with it?
Yeah, so the overview of the webinar was really three key motivation theories or concepts that I think everyone should have some knowledge of, especially if you're a manager or a leader within an organization. So the three were Hertzberg's model of motivation in the workplace. So really talking about hygiene factors versus true motivation or satisfaction factors. And really that's why adding a ping pong table and adding a cool workspace or even pay really doesn't drive motivation. Really the satisfaction pieces are things like the actual nature of the work, the attitudes and approach of the organization around how they're spoken to, how that environment is conducive to. The second theory, which is self-determination theory of motivation, which suggests that the higher quality level of motivation is anything closely related to intrinsic motivation. So, and then there's extrinsic motivation. And extrinsic motivation really can lead to no motivation if we rely too heavily on that. The idea is we need to create an environment where people are more likely going to be intrinsically motivated. And that means we support autonomy, we support connectedness or relatedness, and we support mastery or competence as an organization. And the last one is friction. So friction is this idea of we can focus a lot on motivating people towards tasks, but if we don't really stop and think about, okay, what's getting between them and doing the task? Because a lot of us might have the best intentions, right? That's the difference between intention and following through. Gave the example of I have great intentions to do the right things, or I might even really want to go to the gym or wake up and go running, or follow through with the performance review process at work. Like I think it's important even, but the levels of whether it's psychological friction or physical friction, the actual space between me and the actual doing of the task can really demotivate over time or just get between me and following through the task. So those were the three theories or ideas that I presented, really thinking about, okay, great theories, but in practice, what does that mean for me as a leader, me as a person within the organization? Within an hour, it's hard to convey all of that.
Yeah.
But hopefully that sent a lot of people Googling, gave them some great things to research and maybe understand on a deeper level.
Yeah, we encourage you to watch that webinar. You can find it on frontlineon.com. It's a free webinar. It doesn't cost you a penny. And you do get a credit out of it if you are looking for HR recertification credits. It was really well done. And we had a lot of really great questions just asking about how to motivate their team or even get their bosses buy-in. But we're going to cover some of those here. But in the webinar, Ryan, you said we can't really motivate anyone without a cost. So what are some of the hidden costs organizations are paying today by over-relying on extrinsic motivators like bonuses, gift cards, or pressure? And how do leaders begin shifting that mindset without losing short-term performance?
Yeah, I think when you think about the costs of trying to motivate somebody when you're relying on extrinsic motivation, especially, what that has a shelf life. We were just having a conversation with a teammate and they were talking about how the leader was very vocal about trying to motivate people, and they were very much pushing them, saying, drive, work faster, work harder, and the desire to motivate them. But really what it had was the opposite effect. So what are the costs? Can we motivate people without costs? I think it always costs us something. I think for many, it's going to cost you a sense of control. I think a lot of organizations or a lot of leaders within an organization, they just wish when it comes to leading people, they really have to give up control to support autonomy. That's a cost. It's not money, but it's a sense of who you are and what your role is and how you function. And it means letting go. It means it's going to cost you something to train people and develop people, create an environment where people can grow in their skills and develop. It's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you time to help people develop relationships, connectedness to the organization. So all of those things are going to be costs on the organization. It's going to be costs on the individual to motivate people. It doesn't just happen by accident. Yes, people will come. Ultimately, we can't motivate people either. Over the long term, if we're looking for somebody to persist over the long term, intrinsic motivation is the way. And so ultimately, it's hard to give somebody that. What we can do is create an environment that is more conducive to that, to support them. But we can't make anybody do anything. We can't really make somebody be motivated. I think we always need to remember that. Again, we can use extrinsic motivation. And you've probably heard the carrot or the stick. We can use the carrot or the stick, but that has a short shelf life. People will burn out over time if that is the only thing that's driving them.
Yeah. I definitely would much rather have someone hit me with a carrot than a stick.
Right.
I remember I was at a past employment one time, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, when I received a list of 10 items that would motivate me at work. And we could choose 2 or 3 of those things off the list. And one of them was more pay. One of them was gift cards to places that we liked. One of them was time with the boss. One of them was a seat at the table. And there's just a list of those different items. And naturally at that time of my life, I'm like, well, who doesn't want more pay?
Right.
But then the more I thought about it, I was like, I really would like a seat at the table. I really would like more time to give some of the ideas that I have. And I even found that as years have passed, that what motivates me has changed. So how much of that motivation do you think is generationally focused? Because I do know that there are older people, more in the boomer generation, who are like, why aren't people just happy to work?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, if I had $1 for every time I heard that. Yeah, I think that is probably the question many people are thinking right now, or were thinking when they were watching the webinar and maybe didn't address directly. So I'm glad you asked that. I think one thing I did briefly mention in the webinar was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, that one's a pretty debated kind of model for motivation, but I do think it tells us something about, and if you're not familiar with that model, we need our basic needs met, like safety and belonging actually is the next, right? Safety, a sense of belonging, which overlaps with some other concepts, before we can ever really start to reach that higher level of thinking of that kind of deeper satisfying things, like looking at my life and what do I want to do? I want to do things of value. Well, when you're early in your career, especially, and that's why it's like, I think sometimes boomers or older people who are more established in their career, financially, they're more established. That's not always true, depending on your age. I think you get looked at and you're like, well, why are you motivated by $1 more an hour? Like, you're telling me you're going to leave our company for $1 more an hour? Yes, if that $1 more an hour means I have more safety and security for my family, for whatever, and maybe the work is more attractive, right? So there's some of those higher level motivators. It's not a perfect science, but a lot of managers I've heard are frustrated. It's like, why aren't you just intrinsically motivated? Why do I gotta like hold your hand to be motivated? And meanwhile they're dictating and controlling these people and think, I say jump, you say how high, how dare you, undermine me, all these different things. So I think it's a whole mixed bag of what really motivates us. But I think you brought up a really good point. You were given a list. And I think for many of us, I showed a video in the webinar around, we ask employees, what's going to motivate you? And I think most of the time I get a deer in the headlights look. We just ask, Nic, if I were to ask you right now, what motivates you?
Yeah. I would have the answer to that question.
You would have
Right.
the answer.
I personally would, but you're right.
But you've done a lot of
10 years ago,
10 years ago,
I wouldn't
maybe
have that
you
answer. No.
didn't have that answer. And I think that's part of it. Like working with especially younger employees, and I've met plenty of older people, they don't even know how to answer that question. And I think that's part of the problem. I don't even know if they know what motivates them. I think that's why some of these theories are actually really helpful, because it's based on research and science, and a lot of people won't give us an answer that's actually accurate. They go off of just general in the moment kind of thoughts or feelings that really won't, like a gift card. Oh, you give me $100 gift card. Oh yeah, totally. But then they actually get into it and they go, oh yeah, forget this. I'm not going to do this.
I have a box full of unused gift cards.
That's interesting.
And it's not that I don't appreciate them. It's just, I don't have the time to go use them for one thing. But something that helped me, and I didn't do this until a few years ago. And if you haven't ever defined what your personal core values are, that was huge in defining what actually motivates me, because I'd never gone through that process. And so I discovered that my personal core values are respect, value, curiosity, integrity. Those things I find value. And if I have a leader show those things to me, that gives me the respect, that shows that they value what I do, that's actually more motivating to me than $1 more an hour.
Yeah. And I'd say it's probably because at a certain point I think for a lot of us, if we're living financially at a place, we don't always have the luxury. And many of us are, that's probably what we're saying is like, well, you don't have the luxury to think about those things. You just need to go and get paid, do work. Just do the work and grit your teeth and push through it. Well, I think we've seen the market shift. I mean, we got to talk about how the market is shifted, where it's shifting back, but a lot of employers were under the gun, under pressure to meet the needs because there's a shortage of people, and the shortage of people is not going away. I think we're in a lull right now. And that's where the power dynamic shifted. For a long time, the employer got to dictate what was motivating and what was reasonable and what was doable. And now the worker is really getting the power to dictate that, because there's just a shortage. And anytime there's a shortage, that power dynamic shifts. It's supply and demand. It's really simple. And so now we really need to understand this stuff, because the sake of our business depends on it. Yes, pay matters. That's where, again, Hertzberg's model is really helpful. Pay matters not to dissatisfy people, right? Getting the pay right so that people can make ends meet and feel like it matches the market and they're being respected by the pay. I think that's even an interesting way to talk about it.
Yeah, almost to me, it's like pay should be baseline.
But
like, you have to meet that need of what their pay needs. But then, do they find value in your organization? Are they, extrinsically motivated enough to keep it going? But obviously not gimmicky, right?
Yeah, well, and we can retain by managing those dissatisfiers. Again, go look at the Hertzberg's model. We can manage those dissatisfiers, and we can retain a lot of unmotivated people. If we're not also diagnosing and understanding what true motivators are for people. And I've seen this happen in a lot of organizations. We spend a lot of time thinking about the dissatisfiers, going, why aren't you more motivated? We've met all these dissatisfiers because we're not thinking about the culture of our organization, whether or not it's fulfilling the need of true motivation. And I think that's why that model is so helpful. If you're truly an organizational leader, that's why.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty convinced.
Yeah, we received a question in the webinar that really stood out to me, because it is one of my biggest demotivators as well. And it was micromanagement. All right.
Yep.
For me personally, it is a motivation killer. And I know the question came up of, is micromanagement necessary sometimes? I don't believe it is ever. And so I'm curious to know your thoughts on it, because I believe if you have to micromanage someone, they're not in the right position. But micromanagement came up as a motivation killer in the webinar, tied directly to autonomy. How can leaders honestly assess whether they're supporting autonomy or simply avoiding accountability under the guise of hands-off leadership?
That's that question is so interesting to think about. And I think what a lot of us get wrong. Um, I think the question was, and I don't remember, was it some people need to be micromanaged or some people want to be micromanaged? I couldn't remember if it was
I don't know if
need,
anyone ever
want.
wants to be micromanaged.
Well, I think from the manager's standpoint, there was this belief, or I don't know if they're a manager, whoever they were that asked the question. I'm assuming they were sitting there thinking, I have to babysit these people. These people are not going to follow through with their task, or this individual's not going to follow through with their task unless I'm micromanaging them. I would wholeheartedly disagree with that. I think, to your point, Nic, maybe the work itself is not right. That's that mastery. Not only is mastery important, it has to be something that I find some kind of desire to master, right? So the work itself, I have to find some kind of purpose or desire within the work. So I think that's maybe that's the right question. Are they in the right seat? That's why we ask that question. But I think some people do need to be quote unquote micromanaged for a time, but that's because they need that to develop their mastery. So we need to do it in a way. We need to not say, hey, I've seen you do this once successfully. Good luck. We'll see you later. What we need to do, as if we're a manager of people that are developing in their understanding and growing, maybe they're not up to our standards. But the problem that we have is the best example I can give is a lot of times when we rely too much on quote unquote micromanaging or giving direction, we're not actually helping people understand why they're doing what they're doing. We're just helping them understand what to do. And so if people only understand what to do, it's a similar thing like you get in your car and you've decided you need to go to a new place. You've never been there before. You don't know how to get there. Let's say it's 40 minutes away. So it's relatively complex. There's multiple turns. And the more complex things are, the more you need something like Google Maps that we all become over-reliant on. I'm a big I like Google Maps over the other ones. Shout out. Okay. So what I do is I get in the car and I decide I got to go to this new place. Say similar idea. I have to learn this new skill from my boss, from my leader, or this thing that I need to know how to do. What ends up happening is I get in the car, I go to this new place, and then the next day or 2 days later, or I don't know how much time, I get in the car and I have to go back to that same place. What am I going to do? You've done it before. Yeah. Turn Google Maps back on and go back to that same place because why? Why do I have to? And a third time, a fourth time, I get into this bad habit of becoming reliant on Google Maps. Why am I relying on Google Maps?
Yeah. So I would say that example works well with someone who might be new to the role.
Right.
So let's say someone's been in the role for 5 or 6 years. And they've had quarter after quarter of quarter, let's just say sales, for example, where they're increasing their sales goals and smashing through them. And then let's say they have 3 bad quarters in a row. Some managers would see that as the necessity to micromanage them or say, why aren't you doing your job? You're out. You need to meet this goal. I watched a video from Simon Sinek, who gave that exact scenario recently.
Yeah.
And he said, it's important to lead with empathy in that moment because it's easy to just go and say you aren't meeting your goals, pack your bags, when in reality it said, hey, you haven't met your goals for the last 3 quarters. Is everything okay?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yep.
Is everything all right at home?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can help you with in this?
Yeah.
And what would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is where this model or these different ideas always runs on the premise that I'm sitting down and I'm asking this person questions to better understand what's going on. The fascinating thing always about that is this person has shown that they can perform the task. And I think that's a good point. The analogy I'm giving is somebody that you've never given them the option or approached them in a way to help develop their competence. They only understand what to do, not how to do it. So yes, you're going to have to micromanage, stand over their shoulders if you never truly approach them in a way that's going to help develop their ability. We work a lot with manufacturing contexts, and that kind of really resonates with a lot of people. On the flip side, if this person has performed at a high level or has been motivated in the past, now what we need to do is understand what's getting in the way, right? That's going to be your number one question, because it could be a myriad of answers, but that should be your go-to question. I've noticed things have tapered off. You haven't performed, and they might give us excuses, and maybe the market is down. Is it a direct correlation to them not following through with their tasks, not following through with the things they used to? Well, I need to understand, okay, why aren't you following through with those things? What's going on? And, Simon Sinek, I'm obviously a big fan, empathy from leader, not assuming what is going on with this person. I think too often, a lot of managers, we love to guess. We love to go, oh, so-and-so's not, maybe something's going on with their family. Maybe the work's just go ask them.
Yeah.
Sit down, have a 15, 20-minute conversation.
Get to know your employees.
Get to know them and ask them what's going on. And maybe the work itself, like you're saying, has just lost its luster. Like and that's where the mastery piece comes in. They feel like they've mastered it and honestly are just biding their time, just getting by, and they haven't really been given an opportunity to grow outside of their restraints. I think, I'd go back to that model. Mastery, connectedness. Perhaps the team has created a lot of frustrations and challenges, and that they don't feel connected to the team. They don't feel connected to the organization anymore because there's been a shift with the team, and that's been a challenge to them. Maybe it's we're taking a more of a micromanaged approach, and they're just like, well, I was successful in the past. Why are you trying to micromanage me now? And then that's diminishing their motivation. But yeah, I 100%, you need to stop guessing, start asking good questions.
Yeah. Get curious with your employees.
Yeah. And that's where coaching is so critical. We have a coaching class. I don't make a plug, but it is becoming quickly one of our most popular classes.
And it's not just good with your employees, your staff, peers, other leaders. It's good with your family, your friends. You'd be surprised how many times I've used the coaching questions and the curiosity with my kids,
Yeah. And honestly, anywhere there's people, if we actually become more curious and understand, and I think that's where understanding, we got to treat people as if motivation and drive comes within. We can't give it to anybody. So we can draw it out of them, but we can't really give them intrinsic motivation. And that's why I think coaching is so critical, is it recognizes we got to draw it out, not try to shove it in them.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have that, like, what do I got to do to make you more motivated? And then we get deer in the headlights, like, or they don't want to give us the answer because we're micromanaging them. That's driving them crazy.
With the topic of micromanagement and demotivators, it's, that's one of my biggest demotivators in any professional landscape. I've always said, as a creative myself, as a creative director for the company, but just as a creative in general, I'm always like, give me the vision, give me the frame, and then get out of the way. Let me paint the picture. That's motivating for me. But let's talk about some of the other, maybe things that don't drive motivation. You shared that pay and perks often prevent dissatisfaction, but don't drive motivation. For organizations that have already checked the boxes on compensation and benefits, what are some of the next 3 big levers that they should focus on to actually move engagement and retention?
Yeah, I would go back to, this is why we start with culture and leadership. Do our leaders support in any way they can autonomy? Do they support competency, and do they support relatedness or connectedness? If our culture as well, so our leaders obviously set that, but also if our structure and our organization really does not treat people as if they are autonomous human beings that need choice, that try to overly dictate things, there's a lever right there. And that's scary. I think that's why motivation costs. Those costs, that's scary. That's giving up control. But if we don't recognize that people have to choose things, autonomy, they have to, then we're gonna have an environment of no motivation. We're gonna have to constantly be having our supervisors, our leaders kind of, crack out the stick or the carrot kind of thing.
Yeah. So in the webinar, you talked about how people persist longer when motivation is tied to autonomy or their identity. What role does leadership play or leadership development play in helping employees connect their identity to their work instead of just their job description?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think it's a double-edged sword because, and I think there's more of a drive away from connecting our identity to work. I think maybe that's a criticism of the older generations in the sense of identity and work, and those typically are synonymous. And I see a lot of a movement of like, work is just work. It doesn't have to be who you are. It's an interesting thing. I was actually thinking about looking this up, and I can't remember where I saw it. And maybe if you are listening to this right now and you want to look it up, but there's a guy that was talking about how do we motivate others, and he talks about using identity language. So they're showing, I don't know if this is always super helpful, but he says, talk to people about their identity. Not so they're using kids as an example. Is like, and he said, "Hey, could you be a great helper?" And so that's an identity statement instead of, "Hey, could you help?" And so it's. I think most people we want to see ourselves in a positive light. So I think one of the interesting things is I think most people have positive intentions or they want to see themselves in a positive light. I don't think most people show up to work and say, "Let me make everybody else's life miserable," until they feel like their life is made miserable. So then they retaliate and make other people. That's more of what happens, is it feels like a retaliation and they're justified, right? So we all want to feel justified in our behavior as if we're the reasonable ones and nobody else is the reasonable one. I guess leaning into connecting with people's identities of how they want to see themselves is actually helpful in understanding motivation and understanding the discomfort that happens when we do things or say things or act in a way that is outside of the view we have of ourselves. So if I want to be a person of integrity and somebody says, "Hey, talk about values," or "I want to be this person," then and some might say, "Well, that's manipulative." Maybe, but I think it is. I think most people, we have a view of ourselves and we want to see ourselves in a positive light, or we want to see ourselves. So if I see myself as a hard worker and I really am going to see, well, I'm not working hard, well, I have excuses as to why I'm not. It's because I don't feel like I'm being treated well. Well, then I want to understand, okay, so if you see yourself as a hard worker, why aren't you working hard? So I don't know if that's helpful for anybody, but I think there is an element of that most people want to see themselves in a positive light, and they perceive themselves that way. I think the same is true around expectations. You talk about give me the frame and let me paint within it. It's always interesting when you say that, because I think other people have a different picture that they're painting. And so if you come and say, "Hey, look at this great painting I painted," and they went, "That's not what I was envisioning at all. That did not meet my expectations." We can go down the path of saying, "Well, Nic's lazy.
Yeah.
Nic is unqualified. Nic is, let's stick with the lazy, unmotivated, whatever." I think that's where developing our leaders and managers in a way that they really understand the disconnect and hidden expectations that we have for people, and we didn't really align on the expectations on what that picture, or am I truly going to give you the full freedom to actually paint that? I know I kind of took a left turn there, but that's kind of where my brain went.
Yeah. No, that's good. I want to shift a little bit and talk about intrinsic motivation and how we can unintentionally undermine it. So you talked about in the webinar, the over-justification effect. It challenges a lot of common management practices. Maybe you can explain what that is again, but then also, where do you most often see organizations unintentionally undermining intrinsic motivation while trying to reward good behavior?
Yeah. So over-justification effect is when people are generally already motivated to do something, I'll use the example of you have 85, 90% of your people are showing up on time. I think this is happening a lot in the manufacturing context. But then you have managers that fixate on like the 3 people that aren't showing up on time. And then they create an entire strategy around that, which is, and maybe it's more than 3. I know some people go, well, you don't know what it's like here. Maybe it's more, but then we create an entire strategy of how do we get people to show up on time. And then what they land on is let's give them gift cards for showing up on time, or let's punish them for not showing up on time. And so we fall into the lower form of motivation, which is the carrot or the stick, extrinsic rewards, all of that stuff. But then what's going to happen to that 85% of people that already were showing up on time? They're already generally good about that. If we create an entire strategy around that, what's potentially going to happen is when we take the gift cards away, which is definitely what has happened in every organization, is like, yeah, we just couldn't sustain that, giving away X amount of gift cards over time, or they just lost it requires consistency. It requires the manager to stay on top of it. It requires a lot of support. That reward goes away. And so what happens is those 85% of people that were showing up on time, well, you've now taken that reward away so now they're not getting rewarded. So now they've lost motivation to show up on time because they're no longer being rewarded for it. So that's what over justification effect is what we do is we use external rewards to try to motivate somebody towards something they were already intrinsically motivated towards. And then they stop doing the behavior because we've then taken away the extrinsic reward. The example I gave in the research that they did was around puzzling. So there were people that really enjoyed puzzling. They put 2 groups in a room. They all enjoyed puzzling. They rewarded one group, didn't reward the other group. The group they didn't reward because they already liked puzzling. They just kept puzzling. The group that they rewarded for completing the puzzles, then they took the rewards away. They stopped completing puzzles. And it's because they took the reward away. And so then they attached the puzzling to the reward. And so they kind of diminish the intrinsic motivation to puzzle. And they said, well, I'm not going to do another puzzle if we're not going to get a reward. And the other group, they all rated themselves high, the similar level on puzzling, on enjoying puzzling. It's not my favorite thing, but I know people genuinely get frustrated when they see a puzzle that's not completed. Yeah. Like these people. I was just at a coffee shop and there was one and people couldn't help but go over and they saw a piece and they're just waiting in line. It's just irking them. It's just driving. They want to complete it. And so we got to be careful in organizations that we don't create strategies around those few people, and we have a conversation with those people and go, okay, what gives? What's keeping you in? We're going to get excuses or genuine reasons why they're not showing up on time. And are we maybe over obsessing about that when maybe they can stay 30 minutes late and, drive the same results? And that's actually going to help them feel the sense of autonomy, that, hey, I get some leniency here and choice, that it works better for me to stay 30 minutes later and drive till the work gets done. You're going to get so many more wins and find so many more people are potentially more intrinsically motivated if we just give them that little sense of autonomy to say, oh yeah, if you want to stay 30 minutes later, listen, you need to show up in this window, get your work done, but I have some leniency. I can give some window, but I am going to expect you to, follow through and stay an extra 30 minutes or whatever. Yeah. I know doesn't necessarily work that way in all manufacturing contexts, but I think the more we can give the freedom and let our managers work that way, the more we'll potentially create a culture where people are motivated.
Yeah. I think not just even just manufacturing, but, professionals landscape, it's, but some people need flexibility. They need flexibility. And how flexible are we with them if they need that?
Well, and the cat's out of the bag. I think I didn't share this. I think I dropped it, but Spotify, the CEO, I think it was, just recently said this, a little controversial because a lot of organizations are moving away from working from home, whereas Spotify is kind of stuck to their guns. I think there's pros and cons from working from home. It can definitely threaten connectedness to the organization, to the team, and some people are going to find that really demotivating. It's going to be really challenging for your new employees to grow in competence when they can't interact with people that know more than them. So there's a lot of downsides when it comes to motivation. But what the Spotify, I think it was the CEO said, we spent a lot of time trying to hire adults. We're not going to treat them like children.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And I was like, ooh, there's a mic drop right there.
That's actually really good. That
Yeah.
goes back to the micromanagement thing.
It does. And I think there's an understanding around what motivates people. Now the cat's out of the bag that people can have some level of autonomy. People can have flexibility. And that's what's driving that flexibility thing. It is a convenience thing, but there also is a motivating factor of, hey, I have flexibility. I have choice. I have choice around how I spend my time. And actually, I'm more motivated to work at this organization because they give me that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. So in the webinar, just speaking on autonomy, in the webinar, you mentioned that you made the distinction that autonomy support is not laissez-faire leadership. What does healthy structure actually look like in an autonomy supportive environment? And how does Frontline help leaders find that balance?
I think that's one of the most critical questions you need to ask as a leader. Autonomy support is not hands-off, go do what you want kind of thing. I was talking about shared expectations. A lot of mistakes leaders make is they don't really lay out, hey, here are the boundaries, right? We need to create some level, because sometimes too much autonomy can be disruptive for other people. So we see that. So then you create friction. Let's talk about the flat. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about that, but the inner work friction when people aren't connected and they rely on each other, and the handoff of work, all of that stuff. So full autonomy to the point where it's laissez-faire and I don't have any kind of direction, shared expectation, shared understanding what success looks like, support from my leader when I need it, then that is not the kind of autonomy we're talking about.
Yeah.
Autonomy is really, we're talking about, hey, you have choice within the bounds of this playground, this area. You talk about the frame, interesting way to think about it. You have choice. That as a leaders, we need to be really good at striking the balance. We talk about the balance of leadership. That's what it's all about. Giving the appropriate level of support and connection to support people's autonomy, as well as challenging them when we recognize they're going outside of the bounds of set of expectations, because it's getting in the way of the effectiveness of the team, the effectiveness of the work, of the organization. And if we set that up on the forefront, it helps us support both autonomy as well as getting stuff done, or not getting in the way of supporting other people in the process.
Yeah. So maybe let's talk about real quick with autonomy and relatedness and how that plays into it. So we know that relatedness isn't about being best friends; it's about being heard. So maybe in teams where certain personalities dominate decision making, how can leaders intentionally design meetings and processes so quieter voices don't disengage?
Well, I couldn't go a full hour without talking about DISC. You just set me up for it. Whatever it is that you use, this is going to be a threat to your team as a leader. It's going to be a threat to the effectiveness of your team as well when you have people sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Because other people are much more likely to jump in, take control. And so, but it's also going to be maybe super motivating for those people that get to have their voice be heard and jump in, but it's gonna potentially detract from others' motivation. That being said, it might be stressful for that person to speak up. It might be difficult for that person to speak up. That's where we find that balance between challenging people to speak up, but also challenging people to stop talking and recognize,
Put a cork in it.
like, hey, so this is what I did with my team. Here's a practical example. I recognized that some of the people on my team were not speaking up, but I wanted them to. I felt it was important. I think we needed to work together. They had ideas that I found they weren't sharing, that maybe they were sharing with one or two people on the side, but actually were frustrated and disagreed with something or where we were going with something. But they weren't sharing those things. And so I can point at them and say, well, dude, Grow up, be an adult, speak up. What's your problem? Yes, I can have that conversation in a much more tactful way to say, instead of casting judgment, to go, hey, what's stopping you? There's the question, right? What's stopping you from speaking up?
Yeah, it's a coaching question right there.
Coaching question. So I need to understand what's getting in the way. Treating them as if they have choice, treating them, not telling them what they need to do, but asking them what's getting in the way of this desired behavior. That is also maybe assuming that I've set the boundaries to say, hey, as a team, how do we need to function to be successful? Well, one of those things to be successful is everybody has a voice. Everybody speaks up. So I set the tone as a leader. Then I need to figure out, okay, so there's some people that aren't speaking up. They aren't kind of living into that. What's getting in the way? Having that conversation, and then having a group conversation to go, some of us are speaking too much. Some of us are not speaking not enough. We need to make some commitments here. And so having an open, some one-on-one conversations to understand what's getting in the way, maybe make a request, and then have a group conversation to say, hey, here's what's going to help us be more successful. Lastly, one really simple practical thing is what I realized is I wasn't providing a outline to meetings or to conversations for people, and that was stopping them from speaking up. They didn't feel prepared. They felt uncomfortable with saying anything. And so I said, okay, what do you need from me there's recognizing mastery. I need to support them in their feeling of competence and ability. What do you need to meet? Would it be helpful if I provided the outline of the meeting and the goals and what would be most helpful from you before the meeting? And they went, absolutely. Is that possible? That could happen. They actually said this to me. And I went, what do you mean? How could you not, why would you not think to ask that of me? They're like, oh, well, I just assumed you were really busy. I just didn't think we would really get the agenda until, 30 minutes before the meeting, or maybe it was the morning of usually. I went, oh, I could do a little work and try to get it to you the day before. Is that helpful? They're like, oh, that would be, so you'd actually read it? See, my assumption is I fly by the seat of my pants right now. I'm just going off the top of my head. Whereas for them, they wanted more time. So again, that's how I support them in their feeling of mastery in this process. And then they spoke up in meetings because they felt prepared.
We had a teammate one time, I don't know if you remember this, but recommend the idea of the garbage can in the meeting. Or was it parking lot?
Parking lot.
There it is.
Garbage can. Maybe not.
The parking lot.
Yeah, that's a great tool as well. If anybody is familiar with that, it's like sometimes people throw out ideas and you don't want to just shut them down. And there's like this fear of like, oh, if I start doing that, people will stop sharing.
Yeah.
I'll go, hey, that's really important. It'll potentially derail the conversation. So let's throw this up in the parking lot.
Park it. Yeah.
Yep. Let's park it, and we're going to add it to a next agenda. But it's a visual tool to help us not forget what that thing was, and it helps them feel heard. I think is the other thing is like, hey, that's that connectedness, that belongingness is like, hey, my voice matters.
Yeah, no, I thought that was such an interesting visual representation of that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago the idea of friction. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about the concept of friction hunting, because it does feel practical. But then also, if a leader wanted to apply this immediately, what's one common workplace process, performance reviews, onboarding, training, where friction is quietly sabotaging motivation? So maybe first describe what that truly means. What does friction hunting mean? And then how is it quietly sabotaging motivation?
Yeah, I think this is a relatively new concept for me even. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking about it. The idea is it's anything, and I said it earlier, anything, a psychological barrier, and that's where like what's getting in the way is sometimes people don't always know what that is, or it's a literal physical barrier. Anybody that is familiar with lean and waste is that added motion or steps that could be getting in the way of somebody following through with a task. A non-work example, then I'll give a work example, because this one definitely resonates with me, is, hey, I want to go to the gym, and the only time I can go to the gym is before work. Every other part of my day is booked, but I really want to go to the gym. So I'm motivated, well, at least I should say, I'm motivated the night before, and then I wake up at 5 a.m., or maybe not, to go to the gym. And what do I want to do? I want to hit the snooze button, right? What that's right there. Waking up early is difficult, but there's some added barrier. I got to wake up. I got to put on my clothes. I got to find my gym shoes. I got to fill up my water bottle, all these different steps that I might have to take to get out the door and go to the gym. So the way of removing friction, and I forget who it was that shared this example. This isn't my example, but I thought it was so helpful, is to wear my gym clothes to bed. They're comfortable enough, right, to wear to bed. So I put on my gym shorts, t-shirt to bed, put my shoes by the door, like remove as many steps as I can the night before when I am motivated and when I am thinking about it. So when I wake up, it's like I've removed excuses for myself. I've removed steps. I've also made some micro commitments the night before. This is more, how do I follow through a task? Maybe I'm not always the most motivated to do. So I've also made some so when I wake up, it's like, oh, everything's already ready for me. I can just roll out of bed, throw on my shoes, out the door. Obviously that's different in Michigan in the winter. It's even harder to do, right? When it's dark, all those things. So friction hunting is removing as many steps as we possibly can between ourselves or other people and the desired behavior.
Interesting.
And the more we can do that, the more likely people will sustain those behaviors.
Okay.
Because people might be actually motivated to do the task. I think this comes up, a practical example is safety. Too often, I think some of the safety mechanisms, some of them are necessary, some of them are overly complex for no reason. There was somebody, I think, that was lifting things that were way too heavy. They shouldn't have been. They should have been using some sort of mechanism to be lifting these things, but they had to walk all the way to the other end of the floor to go get it, bring it back to the thing. It was a whole 30-minute ordeal, or maybe not 30 minutes, but it was quite the process. And so instead, it was quicker and easier to just strain their back, get all out of whack, potential injury, to lift this stuff. And so that's a problem. And so if I'm going to begin to look at this and go, listen, I need to make the desired things easier and the less desired things harder. For them, it was easier, although riskier, but it was just quick. So that's one easy way to look at it, is how do I make the desired behaviors easier and the less desired behaviors harder? Another one is like the performance reviews. Some of y'all out there have way too complex of performance reviews. People already don't want to do them because they're not even fully understanding what.
I don't even like doing them.
What the purpose of them, how they affect anything, how a purpose isn't necessarily something we've really talked about, but people want to see what the purpose is, and if they don't see it, if they don't see the impact of it, then they're going to struggle. And so sometimes, that goes back to that sliding scale of motivation. If we see the value of it and the purpose of it, then we're more likely it's more connected to intrinsic motivation. If I don't see that, and if it's not purposeful or meaningful to me, that's going to be a barrier. That's going to be a challenge. That's one of those psychological barriers. If I don't really see the purpose, if I don't really understand it, if it's not really connected, that's a barrier. Yeah. The other thing is the actual steps you have to go through to fill out these things. I got to go in some folder buried 17 folders deep, and I've forgotten where they are. And I have to go in and I have to rate this person on 27 different things. And I'm not really sure how to rate them because it's a complex rating system. It's 1 to 5. And I'm not even really sure what any of this means. And a 5? Okay, sure. So I'll just give them all 3s, which is what we see most often in the workplace. I don't want to get in the way of them getting their bonus, if it's even connected to bonuses, right? And so all of those things, the layers of folders or place that we store it, the number of things that we're trying to rate people on, the time I have to take, all of that stuff is friction. So we got to lessen the categories. We got to help people see the direct connection it has to, and honestly, they've studied performance reviews, and I'm just going to say right now, performance reviews is more of a limiting dissatisfaction than it is a motivator. It's something that I think a lot of organizations decided they need to do, but it's like getting to the end of your year and you've played soccer. And your coach comes up to you maybe for the first time. Maybe they mentioned some things, a couple things here and there. Maybe you play music, whatever it is. Your teacher comes up to you and gives you all the feedback that you just did over the last 6 months about how you missed that one pass and how you did that. And how are you going to feel as a player, a musician, dancer, whatever you're doing, if that's really the main source of feedback that you've received from your leader.
My question is why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago?
Yeah. And is that going to help you perform your task better?
No.
No, it is not. It's not going to drive motivation. It's not going to drive mastery.
It's going to give me a little fear.
It's going to drive fear. It's going to drive this sense of, well, now I'm being punished for this thing that I didn't even know. And so performance reviews, they showed, do not drive performance. They don't drive performance. They might help us get kind of a closure to the year. So there's benefit to that. But I think most of us know if this is the first time we're hearing about something that no one's told us that we've done something well, over the last 6 months when it happened, or no one's told that we didn't do something well when it happened, it should not be in their performance review.
Interesting. Yeah. So you one of your analogies about the carrying the box across the floor, and we're running out of time, but one of your analogies reminded me of a situation that happened to me in the Navy. And so my question, I'm going to share the situation, but my question is, what do you say to leaders who are intentionally or unintentionally adding friction to the process? And so what happened is I was in the Navy in 2004 to 2010. And I was stationed in Manama, Bahrain, off the coast of Saudi Arabia. So it was a little island, Bahrain, at the Naval Support base there. And where I worked was about a mile walking distance to the post office. And so we had a lot of materials that would come in every single day in boxes and stuff. And so we were given a golf cart to drive across the base to pick up our materials and bring them back. And this was a daily thing. And one of my responsibilities was to go pick up the materials, come back and sort them. And so there was one day where our CO of the base decided to play a prank on me because he didn't like that everyone was using golf carts. He wanted, the base to be more walking friendly. And so I went to pick up the materials and I walk out carrying these 6 or 7 giant boxes and my golf cart's gone. And I didn't know it was him at the time, but my golf cart was gone. And so now I'm like, where's my golf cart? And it's Bahrain in July. It is probably 125, 130 dry heat. And I'm in full uniform.
Yeah.
And so I still have my responsibilities. I still have to carry my boxes. I can't leave them there. I got to carry them back to the base or the office. So I carry them a mile. I get everything there. I'm dripping in sweat. My commanding officer there in the office said, you look like you're having a heat stroke. You need to go, to medic. And so then I go, and then I'd spend another 4 hours that afternoon walking around looking for the golf cart, still dripping in sweat. Ended up finding it. Everything was fine. He apologized. He played a joke.
Yeah.
But it added this friction to my job.
Yeah.
Unintentionally, maybe.
Yeah.
But what would you say to leaders who are unintentionally or intentionally, like, how can you have that awareness?
I think sometimes it's intentional.
Yeah.
I
agree.
I think a lot of times it's unintentional, but I meet too many leaders that go, well, I didn't have it that easy. Or back in my day, or why should they have, and so let's make them have to push through all of these things to be able to accomplish. And so there's like, I don't know, jealousy or sense of you got to earn it. And don't get me wrong, doing hard things is good for us, right? Going for a run, doing hard things. But if we want somebody to sustain things over time, especially stuff that is as not quite as meaningful as picking up boxes and getting them to this location, we can draw some deep meaning out of it and potentially drive that. But I do think leaders are unintentionally adding friction as well because they don't actually understand how work is being done. They kind of stand up on their, what we call the balcony, or as a balcony and dance floor analogy. They stand up there and go, well, it should be pretty easy. They just move it from there to there. Like, what's the problem? And then what they don't do is they don't get down, and that's where Simon Sinek talking about empathy and really understand how is the work actually being done and what are some unnecessary little bumps or true mountains that are getting in the way of them being able to accomplish these things. And so what leaders are doing is they're coming up with these great plans or processes or outcomes, or if you're somewhere in the organization, but unless you get what we call the dance floor, unless you get down with people and understand how is the work actually being done and what are the frustrations and the things getting in the way of that, you're most likely at some points creating this level of friction and added unnecessary stuff to the mix of their work. And you're driving your people crazy if you don't actually aren't asking the question, hey, what's getting in the way of you being able to accomplish what you need to accomplish? What are your working frustrations?
Yeah.
So you're most likely doing it. And we do it, and it is a thing of work. But if we're not taking time to understand what those things are, people really appreciate it when their boss comes in, tries to understand those things as well. And so then they feel connected to you. And then again, that's going to drive motivation.
You know, you just reminded me too of John Maxwell's book, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and
classic.
The Law of the Lid. And I think if you don't know what's getting in your employees' ways from succeeding, it's probably you. Go read that book. Maybe we're going to do another podcast talking about some of those laws and how they relate to modern day workplace. But just to kind of wrap this up, if you could challenge leaders listening with one uncomfortable question coming out of this webinar and podcast, what should they ask themselves about the environment they're creating, and how can Frontline partner with them to change it?
Yeah. I mean, I think you just said it. And Maxwell, who's got a lot of wisdom, is to say, before you start asking the question, why aren't my people motivated? Why aren't you? You got to look in the mirror and ask, is it me? Am I creating an environment where people are more likely to be motivated? Am I supporting people's autonomy, which is scary because you're probably promoted because you're really good at what you do. And you probably have all these hidden expectations and assumptions. So is it me first and foremost?
Yeah.
Am I behaving in a way? I love, there's a video, it's kind of outdated, but would I follow me?
Oh, yeah.
And it's this video that just shows all these blunders that a leader does, and really he's undermining really these key 3 things in the workplace. And so the question is, would I follow me? Is the first question you need to ask.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, I want to thank Ryan for joining us. If you learned anything that you want to talk more about in this podcast or the webinar, we want to connect with you. You can connect with us at www.frontlineon.com and just fill out the contact us there. Or you can email Ryan directly from the website as well. And go watch the webinar and go explore some of the other trainings that we have available. You know, we mentioned a few of them here. Developing Coaching Leaders is one of them. Purpose-driven leadership training, which literally is turning the mirror back on yourself and reflecting on your own leadership styles. There's also Leadership Foundations and Supervisor Bootcamp, which is tailored more towards manufacturing environment. And so many different training opportunities there on the website to explore, just to help you develop people, inspire growth, and unlock potential the best way that you can in your workplace. So we want to help you. Contact us. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you next time on The Frontline.